Chad Burmeister. Welcome to the ROI Online Podcast.
Man, great to be here. It's such a great world we live in these days, and I'm always excited to talk with smart individuals like yourself and share some of the lessons that we're learning out there in the market.
Well, shucks. First of all, you've got this great name. I don't know if you were in a fraternity, but that's an immediate competitive advantage as far as being like one of the favorite guys, Burmeister.
Well, I wasn't in a fraternity, but I did play lacrosse. And I remember on the back of the jersey when they started printing the names, it was always a little longer than the average bear. So, we had to use the smaller letters for my jersey.
Well, anyway, that's a great name. So you're an author on several books. You're a CEO of a couple of companies. You have a podcast, AI for Sales podcast as well. Your books are, the one's titled AI for Sales, and then there's a couple of versions of Sales Hack. Is that correct?
Yeah. Originally, Sales Hack came together because I'd wanted to write a book for 12 to 14 years. I kept building the chapters out, and I was on planes all the time. But when I get on an airplane, I fall asleep in the first 20 minutes right on takeoff. So writing of the book on the plane never worked over 12 years. And so I wrote the book Sales Hack by aggregating a lot of very, very good salespeople and, very good salespeople. I said, what's your biggest sales hack that you can share with the world? Mm-hmm. And within days, I had gotten 30 chapters of contributed sales hacks.
Nice.
So it was quite the sales hack in itself to put that book together.
I love sales. I've been doing it. That's where I always got pigeon-toed or pigeonholed. I'm not pigeon-toed, but I got pigeonholed. They're similar but different. But I always would in an organization be the salesperson. I was okay being. Everybody knows whether you're doing great or you're sucking. They know what your quota is. They know when you hit the quota, but we don't have a clue if accounting's hitting their numbers, and we don't know what production's really doing. And so, but to be in sales, I think the thing I really liked about it is I looked at it more as this is my little business inside of a business. And if I just apply myself and spend a little time after hours, I can really get good at this. I used back in the day, Outlook started to be a little more functional where you could set these reminder tasks. And I set up a little system. That was my first foray into a CRM, if you will, using technology to supplement my sales process. But what it did is it helped me sell about 20% more than the guys that I sold with or against, because it wouldn't let me, if I would just be diligent and put a reminder when that person said, why don't you come back in 6 weeks? And I would actually come back in 6 weeks. And it was a great way to confront whether that was just an objection or legitimate. And I would get accounts that most people wouldn't get just because I followed up, because I took advantage of technology. So sales class is teaching, but your ScaleX.ai, tell us a little bit how technology nowadays is really supporting the sales process.
Yeah, well, there's a great author named Skip Miller, and he's been an author, a trainer for many, many years. And I went to one of his early classes when I first got into sales. In fact, my second job out of college, and I had the luxury of meeting him very early. And one thing that always stuck on my brain was revenue equals frequency times competency. Right? The more frequency, if you're early in your sales career, you don't have a high C, you're a low C. I mean, there's a few naturals out there, but generally speaking, we as sellers start out early and we don't know what it is we're doing. So you have to focus on the frequency. Mm-hmm. And then over time, the competency comes up through repetition, right? Just like riding a bike. If you ride a bike, the first time you skin your knee, the second time you get a little better. By the 10th, 20th, 50th time, you can jump off of a ramp and land, right? Yeah. And do all kinds of fun things. So what AI is allowing people to do is, I think what a lot of people think of is the frequency side. Let me just email blast my audience. Let me spam everybody. And sure, some people are inadvertently doing that and being very impersonal. What's most exciting to me is bringing the personality and bringing better communications so that you're not just getting frequency up, but you're doing it at a better competency level. So, I'm actually going to an event this week. I'm going to have 18 CEOs at an offsite location in Winter Park. And I'm talking to them, and I've got a revenue equals frequency times competency, a little back of the napkin drawing. And it says on one side, here's a T-chart. Here's you and here's me. And I'm going to say, okay, how many data records do you pull every month of people that meet your ideal customer profile, right? You personally, as a founder, CEO, whatever. Then how many emails do you do? How many social touches do you do? How many dials do you do? How many personal video messages? How many voicemails? How many paid ads? So all these different layers and channels. And when you add it all up, the number that I'm doing personally per month is 60,000 sales touches.
Wow.
And one would think, holy cow, that's what entire companies do.
Exactly.
And so when you're an army of one, and guess what? To get to that level, I ran the math. If you did it on the cheap, you could probably do 60,000 touches for about $3,500 a month. So who can't afford $3,500 a month to go from 1,000 touches a month up to 60,000, right?
Right.
That to me is the power. So then I go through and I say, okay, now let's look at the competency side. What are you doing to enhance your competency? So I read 2 books a month. I attend at least 10 webinars where I listen to other people's content. I like to do the on-demand because then I can fast forward to the tail of the tape. I've hired multiple coaches. So I have not just 1, 2, 3, I have 9 advisors on the board of directors, on the board of advisors. And so I talk to them at least once a month. Some of them I talk to once a week. I'm on 60 or more sales calls. Sometimes on a big month, I might do 100. I host a podcast and then I join a podcast. So about 15 between hosting and joining. And then I try to take 1 class per month. So it sounds like a lot, but when you can get efficient at building this out into your day in life, I don't really work hard on weekends anymore because I've gotten good at delivering all of this in a 5-day work week. I used to work 8-hour days on both weekend days.
Yeah.
So to me, the power of AI is that you can now automate yourself into how you would normally send an email, how you would respond to an email, how you would reach out on social with your kinds of emojis, with your format and authenticity, but you can do it at scale to a level that you've never been able to do before.
See, so your little tagline on your shirt, digitally human. And though for those who are listening, we have video versions of all these conversations, but here's the trap. And I just had a great interview with someone, is that there are humans on the other end of these sales calls. There are humans visiting your sales assets. They have brains, they have families, they have names. More importantly, they have dreams, they have kids, they have hopes. And we're in an environment now that's a virtual environment that we have to take care of and exploit data and digital. But I think the trap is most people fall into thinking of a consumer on the other end, a nameless, faceless thing that has a credit card, that we're trying to use technology to manipulate to get more sales. And what you're talking about, the competency part, really addresses that cliche in sales I hate, is like, well, it's just a numbers game. No, that's a component. You can't sit and do nothing, but it's a human game.
Yes. Well, and so I did a podcast here very recently with someone who's a coach that has worked with a company called Codebreaker Technologies for the last 5 years. It started as a card, right? You're either card yellow, red, green, or blue. And so that was the early days. Well, now this AI can go in and read your LinkedIn profile or take this audio file, convert it into text, and tell you beyond a reasonable doubt what is your bank code. And there are four cards, but there's different orderings, right? It could be BANK, KANB, et cetera, et cetera.
Bank
Each
code.
of us. Yeah.
Explain that for those of us like me that couldn't explain it if you asked me.
Yeah. So the bank code is, are you an action person is the A, right?
Okay.
Do you take actions? The K, and because I don't necessarily know all the B and the N. I remember the A and the K right now. Knowledge and that's probably because my two are action and knowledge.
Yes.
Knowledge is another one. So the K stands for knowledge. And so I think mine was action, then knowledge, right? Action supported with knowledge, and then the other two. And I'm surfing through to figure out if I can tell you what they are right now.
I'm guessing what bank is right now. I mean, the B would be buoyancy or
right. Well, and these are some super people. Les Brown, world-renowned motivational speaker, is behind this. And I remember hearing Les Brown speak at motivational talks 20 years ago. So this is someone who's been around the block a few times and understands the game of being able to communicate with people. Think about, Spanish, Russian, Greek, French, all the different languages of the world. But at the core, we all have a code of how we buy and how we communicate. Imagine being able to know that code on the fly.
Exactly. And when you talk to someone, it starts to reveal itself in their vocabulary, the words that they're using. And I interrupted you and got you off your thing, but go ahead and go where you were going with that, the red, yellow bank code thing.
Yeah. Well, so where I'm thinking about this in the future is that it's difficult to teach someone to learn all the 24 different codes. Hey, I'm talking to you in one way. Now I need to talk to someone else in another way.
Right.
A short-term solution would be, hey, if we're getting leads that come into our website and we're getting thousands or tens of thousands, Zoom video, for example, in these times, why route to a geography if you could route to someone who speaks the same language of the person or the buyer?
Precisely.
Skill-based routing. So that's kind of the short term would be real easy. Let's put a bank of people that, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Let's put a bank of people that match these certain profiles. In the future, if I go to send an email, think about Google Mail. You send a mail and it completes the sentence before you've even thought of what you're going to say. In the future, why not? I write it in my tonality, and for me, I'm a bullet guy. But if I'm sending something to someone who's not a bullet guy or gal, then what if it could convert the language and round out the words to that buyer?
Precisely.
Wow. To me, that's the power of AI, right? It helps you with the frequency, but it also helps you with the competency. And then take it a step further. We're in a dialogue and conversation. And I know you're a certain personality type because the AI tells me, well, instead of me having to figure all that out, well, what does this mean? There's so many things I could say and ask. It just gives you the questions, right? There's a tool called Balto software that can listen to the conversation, and right there on the sidecar, it can pop up and say, oh, that's a really good question that you ask about by appointment only. Yeah, they've been around for 20 years. They were amazing 20 years ago and even 10 years ago, but the world has changed. And so from my understanding, they're not using, it could tell me based on you saying the word BAO, which happens to be a competitor, then I can teach my sellers how to respond in real time. Right. And now imagine doing that based on who the buyer personality or buyer persona is. It's about to get really interesting.
So what you're doing that's cool because you're not only impacting the frequency, you're starting to impact the competency. The last hurdle is the authenticity, because here's where I struggled with having to follow scripts and things that the scripts weren't reflecting my natural way of going about things and thinking. So they were really offensive to me. I could understand why you wanted to practice them and do that, but the competency area really gets good I interviewed this guy that started a band, Christopher O'Donnell at HubSpot. He's the chief product officer there. And I'm just going to run this big company on the product side and I'm going to start a band, but he's got this great bass player. And I was watching one of his videos on how he teaches people to play bass. And there's 3 phases there. First, you imitate, and then you begin to assimilate, and then you transition over into the create. And so by imitating and then starting to assimilate, then you can go into the creative side. And that's what you're facilitating, or that example helps you facilitate that transformation and competency in the sales process.
Well, it's funny. I had this conversation with Mark Hunter and Dr. Howard Dover from the University of Texas at Dallas a while back. And Mark said, hey, look, I'm not a script person. This sounds great for entry-level people, but Chad, this isn't going to work for the top end of the curve. And I said, okay, so think about this. What if you took the Mark Hunter questioning and philosophy around the right questions, you program it in the AI, and for the first week of the rollout, you do the training, maybe it's a 1-hour webinar or something, and everyone says, yeah, that sounds great. Well, then what do they normally do, right? If you fold a piece of paper in half, that's day 1, day 2, day 3. By day 5, you've forgotten 80% of what it is you learned.
Exactly.
Now imagine putting Balto software in and it having the Mark Hunter conversation questions come up. And the first week you say, I need you to be within 90% of the words on the page. By week 2, now I need you to be at 60%. Week 3, we can be at 40%. Week 5, training wheels are off. So you're rolling out a new product, you're rolling out a new sales philosophy and technology. You can push a button and it pushes it to every single human that's out there, where you traditionally could do that digitally. If you're doing a paid ad, for example, or an email, you can A/B test, but you couldn't do it with a whole group of humans. And so now I think the answer to the question there is the unconscious competence, or the assimilate piece that you're talking about, starts to assimilate and you can get to creativity 4 weeks from now, right? Or maybe you're just an advanced seller. And look, I'm going to give you the questions, and because you're so good, I'm going to put it at 0%. You don't actually have to use any of the things that I'm going to give you if you're an advanced seller. Right? So much flexibility with these technologies. It's pretty neat.
Well, what I love about that, there's a framework to get there. Whereas sales has always been this mystical thing that, hey, this guy's good at sales. And people don't realize that there's an innate competence of a process that person follows. But because most of us are oblivious to whatever processes, recognizing them, but also sales, more importantly, it's that person, all that knowledge dies with them when they leave, or if they just wing it, but they have this innate ability to do it, and to be able to replicate it or teach it is huge.
Yes. Well, it's certainly an interesting world that we live in when it comes to AI and AI for sales. Who was I talking to just the other day that we were talking about the ethical side of this, because this other company, Codebreakers, that I mentioned, that does the personality mapping and the buyer mapping, they spoke at a conference and said AI for good. And it's good to have that North Star that AI is for good. Who's the definer of the word good, right? We've all been exposed to a very interesting year in 2020.
Serious.
Right. A seriously unveiling of the mask and flipping of the pancake. And so if you think of the word good, one person's good is another person's evil.
Yes.
So figuring out the definition and who does that, is it a committee or is it one person? I think there's going to be a chief ethics officer with major Fortune 1000 companies for AI. And there might even be a team of people that are involved in looking at it to make sure that the AI, once it's empowered to do stuff, doesn't do the wrong thing for the wrong people, right?
Yeah. So, I've thought a lot about that. And, in this time, who would have ever thought you couldn't go to someone's office and shake their hand and sit down in a conference room and have a conversation, or meet them at your warehouse and walk through the warehouse together? All of a sudden, we've been thrust into this environment where we need to meet virtually like we are now. We need to be able to read body language. We need to do all the things we naturally do in person. But it's like, what can you do to up your competency level in this new environment that you could feel really out of water? And I really thought about it. I think where I land, and what I like about the word human on your shirt, is that when we think about, in my book, I talk about, our world has really changed, but our brains remain the same. Okay. And that brain was designed to help us survive and thrive and flourish before we even had written text, even before we had really languages. But yet we were able to compete against dinosaurs and saber-toothed tigers and all those things, right? And we weren't necessarily weaponized, with fingernails or something. But that brain is designed to tell us when we're safe and when we're understood without even processing language. And so in a sales process like you and I are talking about remotely, to be able to discern what that person's vocabulary is, what is it that they're wanting to do, what are they struggling with, and what's the transformation they're wanting to do, that's a story-based concept. Story's always been impactful. And so to be able to go, all right, think I understand what you're trying to do here, Chad. You're wanting to get all these salespeople that are a little out of water, fish out of water, and really adapt to this and excel. So the processes of training that you have, imagine doing it this way. Well, your brain is designing that story in the imagine part. You're giving them a glimpse, but your brain's filling in all the details. So therefore, they feel safe, but more importantly, they feel understood because you communicated that you get them.
Yeah.
So
I just read this book it's funny. I don't think I'd ever heard of it. The Little Prince. Have you heard of this book?
Yeah, I've heard of that book. I've got socks of that Little Prince.
Oh, that's hilarious. So it's apparently a very famous story by this guy who flew an airplane when he was 12 and then went into the military. He was from France, I believe. And then he crashed in the desert one time. He crashed in New York, and then he ended up crashing the plane off the coast of the Mediterranean somewhere. And then his plane was never found until it was. I know the person who lives in Arizona, and her uncle is the one who found the plane.
Oh.
And so she's like, yeah, you've never heard of this book? Because I'm looking at writing my next book, the 5th.
Yeah.
But much more of a human spirit, human condition kind of a story. Mm-hmm. And it might even be fiction. I haven't decided yet. Mm-hmm. And so this book talks about the Little Prince comes, and it's a little kid that's in the desert with the guy who just crashed his plane, right? This Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, right? Superi,
yes.
I think they would say
that's easy for you to say.
Easy. Yeah. And so the Little Prince says, hey, I want you to draw me a sheep. I heard you can draw. Can you draw me a sheep? And he's like, what? This is weird. Okay. And he draws a sheep, and he's no, that's not very good. And it's like, wait, I've only drawn one thing in my life. And it was this snake eating an elephant. And it's like, that's the only thing he ever drew. So he goes, well, shoot, draw it again. So he draws it again. Then he draws it again. Three times a charm. Still not. Finally, he draws this little picture at the bottom of a box with some holes in it.
Yeah.
And he goes, the little kid, the prince, is like, yeah, that's awesome. Because he goes, what do you see inside of the box, right? The sheep's inside.
Yeah.
So it's your sheep. You own the view. Right?
Exactly.
And so that's what sales is really about. It's not, I'm going to sell you this real meaty sheep or this middle looking kind of cruddy looking sheep or
with
this
these
one.
features and functions.
It's
at
tell
a
me about
discount.
the vision that you have. What does that sheep look like? Why does it look that way? And truly understand one of the best sellers out there right now is Keenan, who wrote the book Gap Selling. And he
Mhm.
talks about, okay, if you don't have the sheep that's that particular way, then what's the gap? What's the impact if you solve the gap? What's the impact if you don't solve the gap? And it's so simple, and 99% of sellers miss it a lot of the time, if not
Yeah,
all.
because they're waiting to pounce on the stated obvious problem, but they're not waiting to explore and reveal what the real problem is that we're trying to solve here. And that real problem is going to involve some emotional insecurity about this decision. It's an illogical component of this whole thing. So, yeah, I've had sales where everything made sense. It's going to save you money to do all this. And they still didn't decide. And it
Mm-hmm.
was like, what was illogical that I didn't realize that I needed to address? It could have been that there's too much at risk of my personal stock price here. If I make this decision to get off of the process we're doing and do a new one, and it could go south, it could crash, and then I'm going to lose all my stock value and look bad.
That's right. Yeah. So interesting world we live in these days.
So there's a book you made me, I think, one of the best books I ever read. It has like the worst title, but it's a great sales book. It's called Conversations That Win the Complex Sale by Peterson. And it's a great by Eric Peterson and Tim Resterer. And it's an excellent book on how to start to hang out in the areas of that emotional part of the conversation where you figure those things out. How is ScaleX.ai going to resolve my insecurities about this new world we're walking into, where it's a lot of remote selling, a lot of LinkedIn, a lot of other, where am I going to find these people other than just cold calling?
Well, Rob Wood had that question, and I met with him early in 2020 when I could still get on an airplane and meet live. So I was in Arizona. We went to lunch, and he had the same question getting into the relationship with ScaleX, right? Hey, what is this AI? And then he thought, if I hired two BDRs to go do the work and make calls, send emails. Well, the challenge is I have to go first find them. And this was a very tight market in Arizona. I have to train them up on my product. And then if in 2 to 3 months, like he's a good family man, he doesn't want to fire people.
Mm-mm.
And so he was like, this is just not good. Like, why? I don't like that equation, right? And he's been doing that for 25, 30 years of his life. So he said, Chad, when you came to me and through a referral, and you said AI for sales, I don't know if it's going to work or not, but what risk do I have? Well, his original sign up with ScaleX was for a $500 a month product that does a lot of LinkedIn outreach. And he said, I don't have to fire a person. It's just the contract's over. And so he just kind of looked at it like, I'm using AI when I buy a book on Amazon and it recommends me some other book to buy on top of it. I am served up AI when I go to Facebook. Amazon Alexa has AI built into it. So I'm using it in my personal life. Why would I not at least dip my toe into the proverbial water and try it?
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, at worst case scenario, he goes, Chad, honestly, he looked me in the eyes. He goes, I could have fired you and not felt bad about it because you're just a product technology company. You're
Right.
not, and you have 150 other customers. So it's not like hiring these two people. So I think to me, that's the uniqueness about AI for sales. You don't have to go and spend $100,000 on something. You can dip your toe in the water, use a $500 product to help you close a couple deals that are $30,000 deals, then use some of that investment and put it back into the larger AI rollout, right? We look at it in three vectors, kind of: data, digital, and dials, right? You got to buy the best gas in the tank. So that's your data. Then you've got to do digital outreach. That could be through email, social, phone's the last one. It could be paid ads. It could be a video message through Vidyard or Loom.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a message to an influencer in your social network and asking them for a meeting for you, an introduction, and then doing the standard dials. So there's data to dials and then all the digital outreach and in between. A lot of customers say, look, we need all the pipeline we can get. Let's start with everything. And then after a month or two, let's peel off the channels that aren't getting us the results that we're looking for. There's other customers who say, no, I want to start with one small piece of the equation and add from there. So don't think AI for sales is a boil of the ocean approach. It doesn't have to be at all.
The question I have, I made the mistake of signing up for an AI tool that followed up with natural language sounding emails. And you would set up an assistant. I called her Anne or whatever, and she would do the follow-ups, and it was like one-off emails. But the problem was, I think the concept was excellent, but I didn't have enough contacts to really exploit it at scale like it was designed for.
Mm-hmm.
Does Scale X allow for, a smaller application with a small business person that maybe only has one salesperson?
Yeah, well, that's where a lot of people start with the social outreach platform. It's has a negative churn, which means for every 10 clients who sign up, we actually end up getting 12 seats right at the end of the trial subscription, because they expand it to other people. Uh-huh. So a individual user who's using LinkedIn Navigator to build an advanced search, as long as there's more than, let's say, 1,000 people that come up in that advanced search, then yeah, you could automate the outreach. Instead of copying and pasting from a Word doc and sending the same message over and over and over again, you can do more of a mail merge kind of a concept through social, just like you would with SalesLoft or Outreach in email, but now you can do the same thing for social. So yeah, we had a customer just this last week, Arjun, who was the former CMO of Papa John's Pizza, called me and he's like, hey, can you talk? I was like, oh, great. What's this going to be about? And he said, I just got the meeting with one of the people in the world that is perfect for my product. I would never have known about him. He would never have known about me if it wasn't for this platform running in the background and getting me hooked up with my ideal prospects.
So one of the problems I've seen, we work and help clients get their act together online. And everyone approaches us on the marketing doorstep, what they really need to be addressing immediately or kind of trick them into doing is really solidifying the sales complement. The marketing should be supporting and complementing the sales process. What do you need to have in the follow-up of your product? We would get people sales leads. We would get them people filling out form submissions, etc. But they wouldn't be following up on them because they didn't have the system in place to exploit it properly. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because for the first 3 years of our existence, we're going on 3 years, 98% was outbound, right? Hey, solve the outbound problem for us. Mm-hmm. Along the way, once we did an outbound program for someone, they were like, wow, you can do 10 dials against this outbound person who's never heard of us, send them 4 emails and send them 3 social connections. And oh yeah, by the way, you could send a Vidyard message, an SMS message. You can do all that. And then they came to us and said, well, could you do that for our inbound leads that we call these dormant leads that have just been sitting there? We gave them to the sales team and they were never converted. Mm-hmm. So we've done at least a dozen projects like that. One was with Ring Central. And we've done about 5 after we did the first one because it worked it works so amazing, right? They generate so many leads, and each rep's only allowed to work 60 or 70 active opportunities at a given time. Well, that means all these other ones are just sitting there in the MQL bucket. And so when they went back and said, hey, anything that's 3 months and older, 3 months to 12 months, we're going to run it through the ScaleX engine. And then they started moving it up, right? Let's move it to 2 months old. Let's move it to 1 month old. So yeah. And honestly, we're into a new planning for 2021, and we're planning to do the same thing for current customers, client success. So, hey, you can only handle 150 customers. Well, if you put AI on top, maybe now a single person could handle 300 or 500, because we're going to automate a voicemail drop 60 days before the renewal. We're going to send an SMS a couple times. Hey, I thought about you this week. You should check out this very cool webinar that's with one of our biggest customers. You can automate all of that, and yet it looks like it's coming from the individual. Even a personalized video. We've started to dabble in automating video outreach and follow-up.
Exactly. We use Vidyard, and so that's such a powerful tool. It brings you to the landing page. You have all these other offers.
Yes, big time.
So help those that are listening. I'm going to give you an example, and we have what's called the Quick Start Academy. So everybody knows you can sign up and watch a video course to learn some knowledge. That's where a lot of the world is going. We do more of it's not a live group, but you get to get coached by our team at the aspects of the things that are involved in that quick start. And I need to sell more of them now. Okay, so I want people to come and self-purchase access to this academy where they get personalized teaching from a group of coaches, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So help me imagine how ScaleX.ai would fit into that problem or challenge that I want to solve.
Yeah, I always try to solve for the biggest impact at the lowest possible cost.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen other companies and other sales leaders go in and say, hey, how big would that problem be? And will you pay me 10% of the savings, and all that kind of fluffy sales methodology. I guess there's the question I would ask is, who could be potential buyers? It's unlimited, right? It's any CEO and founder of any company size, or
marketing
is there a certain range?
Yeah.
Large audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with LinkedIn, there's tons of groups that are out there. So one of the hacks is you go find the right geography, the right title, the right company size, and they're in a group that matters, right? Growth hackers, or maybe they're part of certain groups or technologies, Salesforce user group, whatever. And then when you build your campaign inside of the social outreach tool, hey, because you're a vice president or a founder or a CEO, and because you're in this group, so you're relevant, and it looks as if you personalized it. And by the way, you're doing a emoji at the beginning. You're making it look human. You're not making it look automated. Instead of I with the capital I apostrophe M, you're putting I in a lowercase m with no apostrophe. So it has to look as if you just shorthanded it, because you're scaling yourself to be able to reach out to these folks. And I see you're in this group. Wanted to invite you to this VIP event and then give something of value. We're not going to be selling you anything. Just, you might like to attend this VIP event, for example.
Gotcha.
So I would automate social to the tune of 50 to 100 outreaches a day. Then you do 50 to 100 in-mails a day to a similar group of people. And it's very personal, because it's got to have your title, where you're located, what group you're part of, and why you reached out. And it's give. Then you might ask for a get. It's not, hey, thanks for connecting with me. I'd like to meet with you so I could tell you all about this fancy program. Wrong answer. You've just got a bunch of opt-outs. So that would be my first step, is just using the social, because we're getting 8 to 12% reply rates. You don't get that in an email or any other channel.
No, you don't.
Right. Then again, keeping costs low, There's voicemail drop capability. One of the platforms we use is called Drop Cowboy. It's kind of a funny name. I think they're Utah based. Typically we hide all this behind the ScaleX service.
Right.
I'm exposing to you some of this little tactics that we leverage. So at the start of COVID, we had a company that converted their entire production line over to masks. And they called me and said, "Hey, can you help us?" And I said, "Yeah, I just tried this new thing for myself. Let me show you how it works." So we dropped 1,200 voicemails from Danielle to chief procurement officers of Fortune 2000s. And her voice was authentic. It's her. It's not contrived. It's, "Hey, it's Danielle calling. I'm with Bella Canvas, and we are the #1 provider of masks in the country. Amazon just ordered 100 million masks from us. The purpose of my call is to see if I can get 5 minutes with you to see, have you standardized on a mask company, mask provider yet? Because I know it's going to be important to you. Here's my cell phone number." Right? She got 5 callbacks for every 50 that we dropped in an hour. She sold $10 million in masks. So if the product can hold up, that's the $1 million question for a lot of companies that we work with. They come to us. We fast forward the tail of the tape.
Yeah.
And so if you're not selling any of these programs without us, I'm not saying you are or not, right? I'm talking about other companies. I'm sure you are. If you're not, and we've had 30% of our customers come to us and say, "Hey, can you help us? We need to figure out our outbound." Well, we do it really fast. We sold $10 million worth of masks. Another mask company, 6 weeks later, "Hey, we heard what you're doing with Bella. Can you help us?" 29 meetings later, $0 in sales. I was like, and they was like, "Hey, we're going to need to cancel early.
Yeah, this doesn't work.
It just isn't working." Okay, you don't have Danielle on your team.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line, right? Because it's the same process. So yeah, it was interesting.
Danielle, she got all these job offers, a couple of wedding invitations.
She is a superstar celebrity. Yeah. She was their PR person and now she works for the company. So
I love that. So what's a one question, Chad, that I haven't asked that you wished I would have that you'd love to communicate to my audience?
Sales Class is the other company we launched. And if you're a university student, if you're a professor, we're giving away access to the platform at no cost. So we've had entire classes who come to us and say, "Wow, we have 50 people in our sales school." And I was fired from my first job out of college in the sales role. And I was a badass in college when I was selling stuff that I invented, and I was more entrepreneurial minded. And then I got into corporate Fortune 500 and failed. So my purpose of Sales Class is to give back to people after 25 years of learning. And now there's so many great sales people and trainers like yourself that have created amazing concepts, and we bring that to people at scale. So it's Netflix for sales. Basically, you go in, you answer 8 questions, and then it'll serve up which YouTube videos you should watch, which classes you should take. It's a fully functioning LMS powered by a Netflix style algorithm.
I love that. Well, awesome. Chad, you've been an excellent guest, and I really appreciate you. This is interesting, and I'm thoroughly enjoyed it personally. What's the best way someone should reach out to you? Should they want to onboard ScaleX or the Sales Class? Or
yeah, well, the good news is, we do have a team of about 5 sellers right now. They're commission sellers, and they've stayed with me for a long time. So they're this stuff's jumping off the shelves, I guess. You can reach out to me personally. It's chad@scalex.ai, SCALEX.ai. My calendar gets full 2 days out, but at 3 and beyond, it's usually pretty wide open. So I do still have one-on-one calls, whether you're interested in a $500 a month investment or $50,000 investment. I just care about seeing business people be successful. Last story I'll leave you with: a bird flew into my chimney recently, and it never happened before. But someone had told me that when you're in line with the world, that animals will actually behave differently. and this bird flew in as if it was trying to come. Like, how does that happen, right? There's mesh that protects for that.
Yeah.
And so it's a glass fireplace that it couldn't get out of.
Mm.
And so I went and I freed the bird. We got a big sheet and we took it out to the front door. And I asked someone, that coaches entrepreneurs. I said, what do you think that represents? She said, here's what I think it is. I think it's, you work with entrepreneurs. You could either let them get themselves out of their own mess and try to find the way out of the chimney, or you can open the glass and help them get out. And that's what I enjoy doing, is helping good people scale good businesses. If you got a bad business, if you're a bad person, probably not the right place.
Yeah, not
if
a
you're
good
a good
fit.
person and you have a great business, man, I'd love to help you get out of the chimney.
I love that. That's an awesome story. So Chad, you've got a couple of books. You can check out Chad's books on Amazon. You've got AI for Sales and Sales Hack, a new one coming out soon. And his podcast is AI for Sales Podcast on iTunes and all the places that you would find it.
Outstanding. Well, thank you for having me today, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. So thanks, Chad, for being on the ROI Online Podcast. And that's a wrap.